In all my 37 years in the Foreign Service, I was only really scared twice. Last time, of course, was Tiananmen Square, because it seemed to me that if we were not, if something didn't go right, the whole of China would be ablaze. And who the hell would look after British subjects or anything in China if there was a civil war? And it was damn nearly that way, because 20 countries, 20 provinces were watching Peking to see how they behaved with the student demonstrations. So I was really frightened then. And the early time that I really was frightened was in Zaire in 1978. Now, Zaire, you've seen the picture, The Heart of Darkness. Zaire, the former Belgian Congo, was the size of France and Germany put together. A huge area in Central Africa, with only 25 million people living in it. And in 1978, the Katangan rebels, who had given such trouble in 1961, attacked from Angola and captured the copper mining town of Kolwezi, which lies down in Shaba province, way down to the east of Zaire, southeast, close to Zambia and the copper belt. And the importance of that was, when they captured Kolwezi, it looked as though all that had been happening in the 60s would happen all over again, because Mobutu was really scared of the Katangan rebels. So this looked like a serious thing for him. So the country got very anxious about this, and gradually, as we listened to the wireless, every day we heard that there were massacres going on, that within 5 or 6 days, something like 1,000 black Congolese had been killed, and up to 100 white residents in the copper mines had been killed. So at that point, with the Americans helping, the Americans took charge. The 3 countries the most interested in the Congo were America, France and Belgium. And the copper mines produced a great deal of the wealth of the Congo, so the capture of that would have had Mobutu really scared. And so was I. Well, we listened to our wirelesses, and the Americans fixed up an airlift with Zairean pilots and 200 French paratroopers from the Foreign Legion. And les Français sautaient sur Kolwezi. The 200 paratroopers in half a day had cleaned the place up. They were very fierce, the French Foreign Legion. And so we thought that was over. And then the Belgians said they'd send 2,000 troops in by land and help to get the people sorted out. Well, by then we began to hear there were more killings going on, because the Zairean troops who had gone in with the paratroopers safely had herded the remaining white British people and all the other foreigners into the police headquarters in Kolwezi. This was the last thing they should have done, because the remaining rebels attacked the police station, threw hand grenades into it, and the 45 people who were sheltering there were killed instantly. And among those was a quarter of the population of the British residents in Kolwezi. So you can see how worried I was. Now, to be fair, I ought to say there were only 23 British residents in Kolwezi, and to lose 5 of those killed, it wasn't a great thing. But as the ambassador, I knew that the one thing that would worry the British government, the British people killed abroad. So we set up a tremendous emergency system. We got walkie-talkie radios and telephones, and they sent a great number of the consular staff to the airport at Njili. They watched every plane landing in from Kolwezi, found out who had British passports, and immediately telephoned or radioed about 16 miles away to us in the embassy. And I sat in the communications room with the wireless operator, and as soon as we got any information about a British subject, we radioed it fast back to London so that the relatives would know. And that worked very well. but we were very busy, and of course we then had to shelter the 5, but they remained who got out. And then I discovered something to my interest. I thought we had been really scared. And I thought, what would I do if I had to evacuate and get the British people in this huge country to get out? So I developed a system of wardens. So I thought the only thing that really matters in a crisis is that people must know what's going on. So communications were the most important thing. So I got all the people that I knew in Kinshasa to arrange that each of their groups where they lived, the companies they were in, should have one person as a warden. And they would keep in touch with the embassy, and if we had any information, we'd pass that on at once. And the second thing I discovered was that in a country, any country has had a revolution. The first thing they do is to capture the radio station, the ports, the harbours, the airport. So that if you were saying, well, let's all meet at the airport, you might be doing exactly what those rebels had done, what the Zaires had done in Kolwezi, sending people to a danger zone. So I thought the only way to get out of the Congo was to go by river, to cross the river, 8 miles of river, the River Congo, to Congo-Brazzaville. And that was a basic plan. Keep people in touch with what's happening, tell them where to go in a crisis, and get some bits. And well, it wasn't a very good plan, but it was at least a thought. And that helped me enormously in Beijing, because I created the same system there, that if the government had caved in to the students and chaos had happened in every province in China, the police commanders, the army commanders, the politicians, the party men had to decide whose side they were on. You could see how the country could quickly slip into civil war again. So I had wardens created in Beijing, and communications, and that was the basis of our plan for an escape if we had to.
Well, I'm not quite sure at what stage Dad was creating the wardens. I do know that in fact that we were evacuating most of the people from the British Embassy. All the staff that were considered not absolutely essential were to all gather together, and Alan's number 2, whom we all called, what was she called with the hair?
Alison Bales.
Well, she was called Alison Bales, but we had a wonderful nickname for her, which I now can't remember. Would take them, would be in charge of those of the British Embassy that were going down to Hong Kong to safety. And those of us who were left would actually cope. So the main thing was, once they had all actually gathered together into a convoy, and we put flags, small British flags, on all the cars, and all the children were going, and so I was there handing out sweeties and saying, it'll be all right, don't worry, have a sweetie and have a Mars bar and everything will be fine. And they all went off. And then there was a question of actually coalescing everybody into the 2 houses which represented the embassy, our residence, and the house next door, which was identical in shape and size, which was the Chancery, where the work was done. So my job was going to be organising feeding people and sleeping people if necessary, while Dad and the embassy were working there. So on the first day, when after everybody else had left and things, we went round. There were about 2 or 3 other wives apart from me who'd stayed, and they went around to everybody's flat and took out from the freezers anything that looked as if it might, if the electricity went, and anything that could be used, and brought it to the residence. So we had a stock there. And I remember the very first day we made a very big chili con carne to feed everybody. And luckily I had very big terracotta bowls, I mean really big terracotta bowls. And so we made a huge chili con carne and piled it into bowls. And we took the gardener's sort of pedicab, which had a flat back to it, bicycle in the front, flat back, put the chili con carne and the rice on that, and a pile of plates and things. And then how were we going to get it next door? Well, we would have to wheel it next door. Unfortunately, the Chinese army was in the habit of actually coming racing down our road, shooting guns into the air. So we didn't want actually to, to stop a bullet or two, so we plastered even more small flags over this pedicab. And then we wheeled it out of the gate, looked left and right to see whether anybody was coming. No. Turned right and wheeled it up the road and into the next gate. And I thought at the time, wish I had a camera, I wish I had a camera. This is a brilliant example of meals on wheels. And I thought that would do quite well at home. But anyway, we got it there and that was fine and everybody was fed. So that was great.
How many people roughly were there?
I suppose, how many people were there?
30 or?
I suppose about 13 or 14.
The embassy had about 100 people, so I got rid of all the ones that I thought would hinder us, if you see, including the head of Chancellor, Alison Davis.
Oh, no, darling, please.
She was so clever that she complicated. Ergen Billigay, yes, she would have complicated things. So I said, look, your job is to tell the people in Hong Kong that we're doing what we can for everybody. So that I'll be here and you'll be in Hong Kong. We'll work together. And so, but there have been about 15 to 30 left, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it was as much as 30, darling.
Yeah,
I don't think I could have...
It might have been a dozen or so.
And that was
Yes.
embassy, that was the
That was
whole
it,
embassy stuff?
embassy
Oh,
personnel.
But no journalists from outside?
No,
or
No, because there was enough to do, my goodness me.
So anyway, I'll just take
Yes,
over then,
yes.
because the next thing was, of course, we had to try and make sure that people back, as Alan said, in England were all right, and we were worried about the students and things like that. And there were phone calls coming in from England, from Britain, worried parents whose children were either actually touring China, what had happened to them, or the parents of students, what was going to happen to students. So there was a tremendous telephone traffic, and actually I remember being drafted in to be on the telephone and to answer phone calls that came in all the time, to try and reassure them that actually no British subject at that stage anyway had been hurt. We knew where they were doing something about it, and not to worry. And that it was a 24-hour telephone
And also,
duty, which went on for ages.
there was a real worry, because you see, on Sunday the 4th of June 1989, the students had gone back to their campuses in Beijing, but we had 60 British students scattered in the universities there. So on that Sunday, I asked the British Council were superb, to get up and collect all the students that they could find and bring them in to people's homes in the centre of Beijing where we lived, which they did. And the next day we got them on a plane, a British Airways plane, off to Hong Kong. And I've met 2 or 3 people since who've said, oh, it was my daughter you sent off. Thank you very much, and that sort of thing. But go on, then.
Who paid for the flights? The government?
Yes. British Airways helped too. They managed to get it. And the extraordinary thing was, during the whole night of the 4th of June, the traffic went on as before. Taxis were running, buses were running. You could get around in the parts where the army was not in, i.e. in the square on the big roads, the main roads where the tanks were. But you could get people to the airport. You could go down. There were no regulations at the airports. You could get people onto planes and off they went.
So it was just the square and the main routes.
And the main avenue,
Tian, which is 20 miles long, right through the centre of Beijing. And the tanks came in both east and west along those things. And the massacre really took place about 4 or 5 kilometres away from Tiananmen Square.
Further away from where we were. We were in the west of east of Peking, and they were in the west.
But you heard gunfire.
Oh yes,
Oh, yes,
we sat on the roof of our house watching the bullets, and I remember counting between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning. I thought there must be a horrendous massacre with this amount of gunfire, tracer bullets all over the place. And the total dead was 1,300. That was the figure the party had from Ying or Tang. And also it was the number the Amnesty International had, 1,300 out of a population of a good 10 million or so.
But do you remember also racing down the road outside our embassy, or all the embassies? You know, there were the army in lorries that were actually going around searching for people who might have escaped.
What I think they were doing was at the crossroads, they fired their bullets in the air to say, look out, we're coming, keep away. And it was just after they'd fired a volley in the crossroads on the way they passed the front door, and you went out and wagged a finger at them, remember?
Did you tell me that story?
I was in the garden, I think I was pruning roses or something, I don't know, and I heard all this gunfire, and I thought, what on earth is this noise? You know, it's meant to be over the other end of Peking, it's not meant to be up our end. So I went to the front gate, actually, and there was this lorry coming down the road at full speed, filled with soldiers with their guns, you know, all, you know, at the ready, and the captain or the chap in charge at the front with his pistol and things, you know. And I looked to the right, and there was the crossroads that Alan's just mentioned, with the groups of people there who were looking fairly scared and were beginning to sort of scatter, as it were, when he was firing his pistol in the air and things. And I stood and looked at him and said, don't do that. So he looked at me and he put his pistol away as he went past and things. But I don't know what the hell they were doing up our end of the...
actually... They were going down to the square.
Yes, that's true, because actually they were also firing. Do you remember there was the army firing into the windows, of the diplomatic windows?
That was 2 3 days later. We were sitting in the embassy. We actually were working till 7 o'clock from 7 in the morning to 8 at night every day for days and days.
I'm not sure that we've got the actual...
But a few days after, it was something like the 6th or 7th of June, the army was pulling out, the tanks and the lorries were pulling out and going home or back somewhere outside Peking. And suddenly they turned and fired at the diplomatic compound just outside, just on the Changandaji. It overlooked that. And I think what had happened is certain people, either on the 7th floor or 10th floor, with cameras had gone out. And I think the soldiers thought they were snipers going to shoot at them.
Yeah.
So they turned and they riddled the whole of the 7th and the 10th floors with machine gun fire.
7th, 10th floors of
the diplomatic quarters.
Which fronted onto
where
the long
many of our people lived.
But I think it actually was much earlier, darling, because if you remember, once they had done that, and one of the bullets went right through the flat of one of our guards.
That's right, but that's how we knew about it. Because
yes, but it was before that, because then we evacuated all those, so he couldn't have been there when their bullets threw
No, he kept the security people. I'll tell you what happened. We were there, it was after the Tiananmen Square killings, and this security guard said, terribly sorry to tell the ambassador, but a bullet's just come through the window and missed me and is in the wall behind. And he told me what had happened. And so I telephoned the foreign ministry at once and got Zhang and Zhu, who later was the ambassador here, who was the head of the West European department. I said, look, I demand security, safety for our residents there. And 20 minutes later he rang back and said, it'll stop. And it did.
That's good.
So I thanked them for that.
Yes. Was it much more scary than the Cultural Revolution when people were marching up and down in the streets outside, or was it a sort of similar level of anxiety?
It was scary, you see, because in the Cultural Revolution we knew it was the government that was doing it. They were still in charge. When the army took over on the 4th of June, it was an area of revolution. I mean, it looked as though the whole country might explode. As I told you, all these provinces were watching to see how Peking, the government, would react. And if they'd folded,
Provinces would have gone up in
oh,
flames all over
absolutely chaotic.
and things.
And people would have fled to Hong Kong. And who'd have paid for that?